Pledge of Allegiance. Representative Lang, would you do the honors?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Let's do a quick introduction of the committee members so you know who we are. We'll start with Senator.
I am Senator Donovan Fenton. I represent District 10, which is Cheshire County and Keene mostly.
And I'm Ruth Ward, Senate District 8, which has 20 towns.
I'm Rick Ladd. I'm from Haverhill, New Hampshire, and I'm Chair of House Education.
Mel Myler from Merrimack 9, Hopkinton, and Bow, and I'm the ranking Dem on the House Education Committee.
Oliver Ford from Chester, also on the Education Committee of the House.
Steve Appleby, Director of Educator Support and Higher Education at the Department of Ed.
Thank you very much. First thing we have here is to approve the minutes from the April 14th meeting. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on them? All those in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The minutes are accepted. Okay. Now we're going to listen to you. We have a number of people, and you know who you are, and I will call you when the time comes. And 15 minutes for each one of you. That should hopefully do the trick. So let's start with Executive Director Brian Belmore.
William Hart, talked to Aaron about it.
The what?
William Hart has to leave at 1:30.
Okay.
Aaron told me it was fine to move him up. 15 minutes, it's only revised.
Okay, what is his schedule?
I would advise.
Oh, I see. Okay.
He just needs to take it.
There's some of these is okay. So this one is.
Yeah.
Leave at 1:30. It was a 15 minutes, so we have time to listen to this one. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Testing, yes. Good morning, Senator, members of the committee. We thank you for the opportunity to be with you today to share some personal stories as school leaders in the state and the connection between school leadership and teacher retention and recruitment in the state of New Hampshire. With me this morning, I have brought several board members from the New Hampshire Association of School Principals. Each of them will be speaking on a separate topic for about a minute and a half, so I will introduce each of them up here briefly. We see that statewide and nationally, the issue of retention and recruitment for teachers is pretty dire. Having just come from the national conference with other state directors, this is a equal concern for others in my role across the state. And I know that the focus largely has been around talking about salaries and debt and certifications when it comes to the topic, and we're hoping that some of the information that we share and provide to the committee today is also helpful in seeing that the well-being, of course, of educators is equally responsible for retention and or attrition in some cases. And by well-being, we're talking about a holistic approach to looking at data, national data that says teachers choose to stay and come to certain schools and districts that prioritize overall well-being, which includes providing them time to do their jobs well, embedded professional development, mentoring, a strong culture where they can collaborate and feel connected in a sense of belonging, and the principal of the school matters. So I would like to turn it over to my colleague Kathleen Murphy to speak a little more on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brady. Thank you, committee members. My name is Kathleen Murphy. I'm currently the principal at Clark Wilkins Elementary School in Amherst, New Hampshire, and recently successfully defended my dissertation on the role of the school principal, having spent time interviewing school principals across the state and learning more about their experiences and their preparedness for the role. So we are here to share our collective concerns around retaining high-quality educators, as we recognize that educators are critical to the success of New Hampshire schools. Teachers leave schools and potentially even the profession for a variety of reasons. Research notes leading reasons as being personal in nature, a change to their role, potentially moving outside of the classroom, dissatisfaction with school accountability processes, and a lack of support from school leadership. At this time, New Hampshire educators may be feeling many of these pressures, and the consequence of their decisions to leave the field significantly impacts the lives and futures of our state's youth. We would like to note that principal leadership plays a significant role in teacher turnover. Research tells us that teachers identify the quality of administrative support as a key factor in deciding to leave or join a school. In addition, teachers point to the importance of school culture, collegial relationships, time for collaboration, and decision-making input, also areas in which the principal plays a central role. Additional research completed by the Wallace Foundation notes that leadership is second only to teaching among in-school influences on student success, and its impact is greatest in schools with the greatest level of need. School principals must be equipped with the leadership skills that enable them to be effective. They need to be provided with the support needed to cultivate and foster exceptional school communities where teachers will stay and continue to positively impact the lives of New Hampshire students. My colleagues will share additional information about how we are trying to retain teachers each and every day through our intentional and meaningful work as school principals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is David Levesque. I'm the principal at Franklin High School in Franklin. One of the things that we continually look at for teacher retention is the way that we build relationships with the teachers, the community, the faculty, staff, the kids. And what we're seeing is, although those things may be in place, we're starting to lose teachers with years and years of experience to go take jobs at other places. For example, I'll use Franklin. In the last year, we lost a teacher of 21 years of experience to another district. The year before was 17 years of experience. So we are bringing in new teachers every year to retrain and use our funds to create programs to support them. Just in our district alone, 5 administrators have left the profession because of the challenges of teacher retention and within the politics of teaching and learning. So our hope is that through some support that we will get some education and opportunities to support these new teachers coming into our field as we move forward.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Adam Osborne. I'm the principal of Bow Memorial School, just down the road in Bow. And thank you for allowing us to come in and share some thoughts about teacher retention and recruitment. I'm going to take the angle of the overall system, public education. It's become a more challenging time, I think, than ever before to be a teacher. It just having to do with like the erosion of confidence in public education itself, which is nationwide. It's not a New Hampshire thing necessarily. The conversation often publicly focuses on negatives when you hear about public education. And I think in a lot of ways that's unfortunate. There's so many good things going on across our state and all states in public education. But what you hear about are the isolated incidences, which may very well be legitimate, but they don't represent the whole. They represent the parts. And that plays out whether it's in the media, whether it's with legislation, it's across the board. And I think the challenge there is people feel the broad brush effect rather than the targeted nature of these events. This has made it difficult to attract and retain teachers because they're feeling the impact of that broad brush effect. And we ourselves are actually looking to recruit college-educated folks who are bright and have a myriad of options available to them professionally. And for years, we've been able to do that. I mean, the wage factor with public education is well known. It has been for many years. But despite the wage factor, historically, we were able to attract folks for very altruistic reasons, that desire to make a difference, to be able to impact the lives of future American citizens who are going to be a part of our democratic process. Well, now that cumulative effect, that broad brush effect of these negative instances across the board in education, which are really reported out rather than the many, many, many good things as well, has caused us to begin to not be able to count so heavily on the altruistic calling to make a difference in America's future. And I, for one, actually believe that
that still exists. That public education in America is the way to influence and impact our society positively. So I'm hopeful that, through this community's work, we'll be able to kind of help with that, I guess, public image side of things, where what we hear so often doesn't represent the whole, doesn't represent all that is going on in public education. Because I do think it has a cumulative impact.
Thank you. Anybody else from the team?
Good afternoon. I'm Bill McGowan at Winnicott High School. I've been an administrator for the last 19 years, the last 13 as principal. As far as teacher shortage, I've been very fortunate, at least on the seacoast, that I have not really seen that teacher shortage. I've been fully staffed pre-pandemic and after the pandemic. But at the same time, many of my colleagues across the state in different areas of the state are not fully staffed. We interviewed for a math position about 4 weeks ago, and one of the applicants, the school they were coming from, they just filled 2 positions, one science and one math, back in April. So they went through the whole year with a substitute or trying to manage those classes without a certified teacher. We also have a very good relationship with the University of New Hampshire with the intern program, Future Educators. In 2016, we had about over 120 prospective interns come to Winnicott High School to tour the campus and see if they wanted to teach there. For next year, we only had 4 interns or students from UNH come visit us. Clearly, people are not going into the profession. As Adam said, it could be just the dialogue that we hear throughout the nation, throughout the state. I've been able to hire probably about 15 interns from UNH since I've been there. So clearly, if that number decreases, we will face a shortage as we move forward. Most of my teachers leave Winnicott High School when they retire. Not too many leave to go elsewhere, but at the same time, hopefully as I move forward, I'm not in a position that I cannot fully staff my school. What I believe is facing all schools across the state and across the nation is special education, the need for educational assistance in special education. Those are the most neediest students that we need to serve, and we need to serve those students by law. If we cannot find qualified applicants to fill those positions, that is also a problem that affects those classrooms and also affects the teachers in those classrooms. So again, the Seacoast is doing well, but I know across the state it is not, and across the nation it is not. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Kim Carpentino. I'm the current president of the New Hampshire School Principals Association, also a principal at Gilbert H. Hood Middle School. I've been a principal in Derry for about 18 years now, between assistant principal and being a principal. So right now we struggle to hire in all of our positions. We always feel really accomplished during the year when we think we have just about everybody hired, and then the summer might hit and somebody moves on and gets hired someplace else or decides that they're going to move on from us. So I just have some information that we've collected from each other on our current positions. It is difficult, to hire long-term, for our long-term positions. We struggle to find people who are certified in those positions, and sometimes those positions end up just being substitute teachers because we can't necessarily get people certified to fill those positions, which is kind of where I am in my middle school. We have a long-term math position that we've had open for this year, and I've had 2 applicants all year long for that position. One was certified and one was not certified. Also, I have a current reading specialist position that's open for a long-term position, and I have 1 applicant who's applied and not at all certified in that area for that long-term reading specialist position. In Winnicott, for a math position, they had 11 applicants that applied for their math position. In Derry, where I am for an English language arts position that I had at the middle school, I had 11 applicants, all of which were certified. And also I had a guidance position. That was the most applicants that I had. We had 26 applicants, but only 16 were fully certified. 10 were not fully certified. So those are kind of the things that we're facing now that we hadn't faced in years in the past, where we would have a lot more applicants than what I just mentioned. Also, just a little bit more information from Amherst. Back in 2018 and 19, 160 people would apply for a position for like an elementary classroom job. And currently in 2022-23, 16 applicants. So they dropped from 160 in 18-19 to 2023, 16 applicants. So that's where we see a lot of our struggles are finding qualified applicants that are applying so that you have a wide variety of applicants to choose from.
Thank you very much. Are you going to be, usually we'll ask if we have any questions, can you hang around for a little bit? Because I would like your, let's see, my next one is Superintendent Hart to be able to come to the table.
We just have a couple more people that we're going to call.
We've got a couple, please.
Superintendent Hart,
He just needs to leave at 1:30.
he has to leave at 1:30, and that's why I would like to have him come up.
Well, thank you, everybody. I truly appreciate your flexibility. Just had an issue I have to be at in North Conway at 3:30, and I'm glad I'm getting the opportunity to kind of share my story and ask for the help of the committee. So my experience, my name is Bill Hart. I'm the superintendent of schools in Littleton. It's my first superintendency in New Hampshire, and as you know, Littleton is in northern New Hampshire. So it's particularly challenged as a committee like this, looking at the recruitment and retaining of good teachers. Just to put an accent on the points, I walked out my door coming to this meeting. My high school principal told me that one of our great math teachers that's going to another school district, she's going to be closer to home, but also make $8,000 a year more than she's making in Littleton. So, but what I wanted to do for the committee today is take a look at recruitment and retention through a specific lens. 3 years ago, I became the superintendent in Littleton, and 2 months into the school year, I'm saying to my director of pupil services that we have 2 special education teaching positions open, and so, well, what are we doing about that? Where's the resources that we can reach out to fill these positions? And her response was basically, Bill, this isn't uncommon. We do our best to fill the positions, but sometimes they go unfilled. So I said, well, that's just not an acceptable point of view for me. I know that we have some significant challenges, but we've got to figure out some creative problem solving around how to address those challenges. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the way we looked at special education and trying to recruit and retain talented people. We reached out to Plymouth State University, and we're doing what we call a special education master's program, teacher's residency program. So what that does is, this is our first year. We've just identified a second cohort of teachers. We have 6 this year. And what's that designed to do? It's designed to get people that are getting cutting edge special education through PSU into our classrooms to do a couple of different things. One is to collaborate and co-teach with a regular education teacher. 2, they work with mentors that are special educators already. And 3, we're hoping that at the end of their time with us, that if we have an opening, they would be interested in that opening. How have we tried to address, recruiting people to up north? Well, essentially what we've done is we're paying for their tuition, we're paying for their housing, and we're giving them $1,000 stipend. All of that right now is coming through the ESSER funding. Here's you know, one of the several ways I think a committee like this can help is, it's hard for my board. I brought it to the board to take 2 of our 6 and embed it in our operating budget this year. And they're very supportive, but it was a struggle for them to do it this year. I think we'll probably get that next year, but it's not a done deal. I think a committee like this can, if nothing else, through the bully pulpit, say, here are some of the things towns and taxpayers need to look at to help resolve some of these issues. And you know what I'm trying to say to people is we've had paraprofessionals in each one of our classes at our elementary level. Well, the cost of the tuition, the housing, and the stipend is just about what it would cost us for a paraprofessional that had a family plan, insurance family plan. So it's, but like you know, if we don't do something to get this embedded in either the support from the state or local support or a combination of both, then as soon as those grant monies dry up, so won't the program. And that would be a shame, because we're already seeing our first round of standardized testing for the students who have residents in their classroom was significantly above in ELA than their peers in other sections of classes that don't have a residence in it. So it's, you know, first year, I think it's been very successful. We've already identified 6 additional residents. In fact, later this week, they'll be invited up. We'll give them a full tour, and they'll start their program in August. But again, this is still looking to next year, federally grant funded, and that's not sustainable. The other piece that I would hope that the committee would consider is, I see this as a pilot, a way of creatively problem solving some of our other issues. As I said, today I walked out and one of our math teachers is going to be leaving next year. Wouldn't it be great if we partnered with PSU or another New Hampshire university for a master's program in math or a master's program in science, and did a similar type of situation where those people would have the same type of support. Maybe you couple the math teacher with the science teacher, and you're looking at a STEM type of approach there. So I think this is an opportunity as a pilot to be expanded into other areas of critical need. And finally, the housing program, problem, I know it's across the state, but it's particularly acute in northern New Hampshire. We partnered with a local builder on the 6 units that we're renting for this year. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, that's $1,150 that we're paying this year. There's such a demand, he's renting now the same units for $1,700. So and we have a 3-year contract with them. So at the end of 3 years, you know, we're going to be in a challenging situation. So I think we have to be thinking creatively around how to solve the housing program. Is it by giving housing incentives and stipends to people? Do districts like mine need to collaborate with other districts and purchase, you know, motels or inns that come up for sale, so you know that you can bring people? We had just last week a great couple. I had a math opening and an ESOL opening, both of them hard to place positions, husband and wife team. They worked for 2 weeks to try to find housing, and they couldn't find anything in northern New Hampshire for below $400,000, and they just couldn't do it. So I do think that a committee like this can help obviously if there's potential for financial support, absolutely, but if nothing else, for the bully pulpit, so my local taxpayers will say, hold it, this isn't a crazy idea, this is a way we solve problems. So I appreciate you giving me a few minutes to share my thoughts. And that would conclude
We
my
have,
presentation.
4 minutes left of your allotted time. A question from Representative Myler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. I've spent a lot of time on the softball fields of Littleton with the Hopkins and Hawks and the Crusaders going at each other tooth and nail when my daughter was in school. So I'm glad you're here. And we've heard of this program of providing housing, providing tuition. That's a fairly radical idea.
Well, you wouldn't be alone in feeling that way, Mel.
Well, I'd like to talk, if you could share with us a little bit about how you came to that conclusion and what was the process of developing this program that frankly, I believe should be replicated across the state, but in Littleton, share with us the background, how you came to this program
Sure.
to meet your special education needs.
Well, again, it's. I think you have to start with the problem, and then brainstorm on solution strategies to the problem. I mean, the problem's pretty well defined. I have special educators, math teachers, science teachers, especially at the secondary level, that are very difficult to fill. And so that was, we had, as I said, we had 2 special education teachers at the secondary level, and we had one in one of our alternative special education programs at the elementary level, where the person had left. So we said, okay, well, how are you going to solve this problem? I have been exposed to residency programs in my previous superintendency, but not to the point where it was a residency program where you get your tuition paid for, but that was it. And so we said, well, that's not going to be enough here. Your tuition, first of all, they're not going to be able to find the housing if you want to get them up here, and second of all, just to afford it would be difficult. So then we said, okay, so I started to talk with PSU, and we were lucky, we were fortunate, we have a builder that was taking an old mill building and renovating that old mill building. And so it was a long process of putting those. I said, what is it going to take? What's it going to take? And I figured it would take tuition, you'd have to have your housing paid for, and it would have to be decent housing, and you'd have to have some sort of living stipend. And the other piece I was thinking of when we're doing this, well, I can use the ESSA funds now, but I'm wasting my time if I can't embed it in my operating budget over time. So that was kind of a reallocation of resources was what I have been looking at, what I continue to look at, and some of our support staff reallocating as we have people leave and attrition, reallocating that to these programs. So that's kind of how that played out. We've had a great partnership with PSU. We just got on board recently the Crotchet Mountain Foundation, the Kids Foundation. They've been very good because I wanted to try to support the residents, because most of them are younger people. So how do you get them here, but how do you keep them here? So they've been great. I said, these people on $1,000 can't, they can't go skiing, they can't rent an ATV, they can't, So Crotchet Mountain has allowed us to support them doing those types of pieces. In addition to that, this year they're giving they're calling it a fellowship to people who we then hire. And so right now we have one of the 6 people we've hired. We're hoping to get a second one, and if they stay with us, they will get a $10,000 fellowship from Crotchet Mountain Foundation. So to try to, and maybe this can help with that, is try to get funders to support, because again, if you took what I can pay people, even if I pay them, you know, a second year, master's level, $1,700 a month is 65% of their salary. So how's that sustainable over time, you know? So we have to figure out a way to get them embedded. And I'm hoping as we get them up the salary scale, they'll be able to afford something by the time that level of support from the Project Mountain Foundation is exhausted.
Do we have time?
Another minute, looks like.
I think we'll be fast.
I'd like to just ask you again, Bill, not again, but Bill, in regard to, I live in Haverhill, work very closely with Lori Melanson, who's your buddy down the road as superintendent of schools. We have a similar problem in Haverhill, that we can't keep teachers due to the fact that they're going to get their salary jumped by $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 down in Hanover. My question to you, though, is in your Title II professional development monies that you receive from the state, we see that there's $9.8 million allocated, out budgeted 5.2, approved 4.9, reimbursed 1.2. That's for the ending September 2024. What does your professional development budget look like in terms of the SM Title II monies, and how much do you have to supplement it with your own monies that you raise locally?
Okay, so most of our professional development money, again, my tenure's been the last 2 years, so I've been very fortunate to have ESSA funding that's helped support our professional development. Title II, going into our next budget, is probably 90% of our professional development budget. It's how we leverage that is in the residency program is kind of, I know only I have a minute, so I'm going to try to squeeze, essentially what I've been trying to do over the last 2 years is build our professional capacity to collaborate well. My doctoral work was in highly effective teams, so we're trying to flatten the organization. Once we flatten that organization and we've developed our teams and individuals' ability to collaborate well, now you've created a medium for any type of professional development that you want to go through the system. So it's worked really well. We started with team training with our residents, co-teachers, and mentors. It's like a triumvirate on how they do that. And so I'm trying to invest in things that don't just, that it's not just a one and done. It creates environments where you can have regular collaboration and focus on best practice.
The question I'm
Did
looking
that
at
answer your
is,
question?
well,
Not
I'm
really.
looking at Rochester, they receive $102,000, Hudson $93,900. Littleton's smaller than that, so I would assume you're receiving much less than that. So you have to be supplementing your professional development somehow. To what degree do you have to really supplement what you're getting from Title II to make your professional development program work?
Well, yeah, you know, I just had, right before I came here, I had a meeting with my director of teaching and learning. And again, we've been very fortunate because we've used a fair amount of money of the ESSA funds. But what's happened, as you know, I'm sure, is Title II, 2 years ago, was over $100,000 for Littleton. This year it was 60, and we don't know what's going to happen next year. So if we get, that's like, you know, strangling your fuel if you don't have. So my conversation here is, I said to her, Kristen Wall, I said, Kristen, tell me what we need looking forward, and I got to go out and figure out funders that are going to help support us. But if your question is, do we have enough professional development right now? If we had to rely on in state and federal funds, it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for your flexibility again.
Drive,
Back to Director Bridley Belmar's team. We're missing somebody.
Oh, we got CTE coming up here.
all about CTE right now. Hello, members of the committee, and thank you for having us here. My name is Vasu Pardinuri, and I am the Director of Career and Technical Education in Manchester, New Hampshire. Career and technical education programs prepare students to be college and career ready. And our staff comes literally from all walks of life. Someone could be a brand new CTE teacher, and a week or a month ago, they were a master mechanic or a master chef or a professional engineer or anything at all. And so we are looking to recruit from the industry. It's mostly people that are looking for a career change, and so they have very little understanding before actually getting into the classroom of what it entails to be a teacher in a classroom, and I can speak about that from experience. Teacher recruitment for us, for CTE, is kind of a little bit like looking for a needle in the haystack, because a master mechanic who is looking for a career change is not looking at School Spring or at jobs.org to find their next opportunity. And retention, of course, is also very critical, and I'm not gonna lie, the transition between the industry and the school environment can be bumpy, or very bumpy, in all truth. And so CTE teachers are these unique humans that have mastered a totally different profession and are now teachers. It's not very uncommon for CTE programs to shut down when there is no teaching. For next year, we are looking in Manchester for an engineering architecture teacher. We've been advertising for 3 months now, and we don't even have one application. Before going to Manchester, I was the director in Milford, and in Milford we had to shut down our manufacturing program for approximately 2 years because we did not get any applications from any qualified candidates. And we are not unique here in New Hampshire. About 2/3 of the states here in the US are reporting extreme shortages in CTE teachers. And of course, lastly, certification. Expecting a master mechanic to have a master's in education so they can teach is not how it works. So we have to support these new teachers who are not 22 or 25 or 35 and who are entering this brand new challenging new career. And so having administrators and systems in place that can support them adequately, I think is going to make all the change in keeping them. Finding them, still a huge mystery and a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more from the
Take
team?
questions at the end, or?
No, I'm gonna do the questions if there are no more. Anybody else from the team? 2 more?
You'll be quick, I'll speak.
Oh, you're a big team.
Our organization strives to build teacher leaders and build a pipeline for principalships. Professional development is focused on the needs of New Hampshire. Our surveys through across our association gather ideas for professional development for aspiring leaders that go from teachers to assistant principals to principalships. Some of our professional development is around new leaders, leading with empathy, school leaders' role to wellness, the speed of trust, symposium for women and educational leaders, leadership academy, and we also offer a principal mentorship program.
Did you rehearse this beforehand?
Oh, yeah.
I'm the closer. So as you can see from the list of offerings that we offer all of those trainings for the teachers, any aspiring leaders, and we hope that we have teachers that join our organization so that they can look at leadership, and not only look at leadership to become assistant principals and principals, but to look at leadership because we need leaders in the building. We need teacher leaders to be in the building to help other teachers be stronger teachers. Without those teacher leaders, it's really tough just to do it alone. So we're always looking for those strong leadership skills from teachers. And we applaud that you are opening this dialogue because this is a problem that we see that it's gonna grow and get bigger. And I think without the dialogue in New Hampshire and having you guys kind of lead that charge for us, we worry that it's gonna get worse. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for having us. We greatly appreciate that you opened the dialogue.
Is this the end of the group?
That's a wrap.
Now we can have questions. Questions from the members here? Representative Myler and then Representative Ladd.
I'm not sure how you want to address this with your audience that you have here, but you all mentioned not just the issue of recruitment, but the issue of retention. And that frankly has been part of our charge here, but we haven't heard much about that. So what I'd like to hear from, however you want to do it, writing out, I'd like to hear about what the change has been over your years of experience of working in schools with the climate that develops the issue of how do you retain teachers who just have said, I can't take it anymore. Can you talk a little bit about how you deal with that, or how you create a climate? Because there's no question in my mind that the principal is the key person for providing the climate within a particular school. So can you just share with us a little bit about your sense of history around in your experience about what has been the change in this, where before the altruism that was always brought us to this profession is now waning somewhat, appears to be waning.
I think that is true. It does. It has suffered, and I think that if you are in schools where the leadership has changed quite a bit, then teachers will tend to not have the commitment to stick around. I think that your culture is so key to having your teachers stay in the building, and that's not just, it's not just the leadership at the building, but it's kind of even district leadership. They have to feel as though they are contributing members of the whole district at large, and feel committed, that people in the district are still committed to them, in my experience with teachers. And I think that when things got rough in the last couple of years through our COVID situation, I think that some people at that point were ready to just start to retire or leave the profession. And I think we're seeing the tail end of some of that, and the beginning of a lot more people just starting to leave the profession. That plus some of the trials that happen with the teachers where we're asking them to do an awful lot in schools. I think that it's just struggling. That's why when we prepare teachers, we want to make sure they're totally prepared for the job, because if you're not prepared for the job and you step into the job, you won't stay with that job, because the job is a tough one. And so we want to make sure that all that teacher preparatory programming that's out there will help those teachers to be ready for it, because it is a tough job to have. I don't know if I'm answering your question completely.
Hi, I'm just going to jump in and add to what Kim shared. So I would say a big piece also has to do with the changing child and the current environment in public schools today too. Even pre-COVID, our national organization conducts a study of principals across the nation, and that 10-year study indicated that, in 2008, principals are worried about accountability and test scores, and in 2018, they were worried about student and staff mental health and the ability to support students who may be presenting with more complex and challenging needs. Our teachers are on the front line of that every day. There's been a rise in disruptive behaviors and challenging and more complex situations for students at home that impacts their teaching and their ability to teach and have that environment in their classroom where they're able to, be the masters of their content and build strong relationships with students and fill their buckets for all the reasons of why they entered this field. As school leaders, we support those teachers every day in doing that. And it's been a challenge, and I would say, the role of a school leader is challenging and our teachers' jobs are difficult. School leaders' retention for principals in New Hampshire is lower than that of the national norm. Nationally, it's about 4.2 years, and in New Hampshire, last study completed pre-COVID was 3.7 years. For a school leader to really elicit positive change, any of the research on change cycle requires 5 years in a role. So if we're thinking about really making a commitment to changing the culture of a school community that provides a positive environment for teachers to stay, we need school leaders who can commit themselves in those buildings and provide that level of support.
Representative Ladd, and then
This is a topic for me that, as a retired school principal and distinguished national principal, it wasn't like that when I was in the trade in Maine and Alaska. In Alaska, in fact, I could fly down to Boston or fly down to New York or Chicago and go to a teacher fair and recruit the teachers I wanted. I could bring back a biologist, I could bring back a math teacher and have top shelf. I'm sure that's not available to you here in New Hampshire now. My question I'd like to try to delve into a little bit is in terms of career technical education. I'm always hammering on CTE. And when I talked to Chris Dodge down in the center down on the coast, and you're familiar with Chris, he indicated to me that just several days before school started this past year, he had a person set up to work in the area of technology in that cluster within the program. And within a few days before school started, that person was able to take a job in the Midwest with another $60,000 on top of what they would have gotten here in this state. My question comes down to, Chris said he's restricted by the negotiated agreement that he has some flexibility to offer as high as maybe, and I consider that very high from where I was as a principal in years, of $70,000 to come in and teach in the center, but that was as high as he could really go, maybe 75. The person that he was talking with was offered well over $100,000. So obviously a young person's going to leave. You're hiring people now that don't have the same certification requirements as an elementary teacher would. You can look at experience, and that can go a long way in terms of preparation. I'm sure Steve can talk to that. But how do we get around this issue of, to get somebody in technology, that business is going to challenge you and say $110,000, $120,000, $130,000. You can only offer, at tops, maybe 70. What can we do to allow you to have the funds to support the people you need at CTEs? We only have, what, 17% of our kids in the state involved in CTE?
Yes, right now we have at least 9,000 students that are taking CTE classes, so it's not a negligent population. And also we are trying to strengthen our industry and our community here in New Hampshire. So part of our job is to also prepare them for college and career here in New Hampshire for the industries that are important for us. So in terms of salaries, salaries are negotiated separately by each district. And I think that the districts that had the most success were the districts that were the most flexible when it comes to hiring CTE teachers. So the way that the pay scales work is that we go from degree plus 15 plus 30 and so on. When you bring someone in with an associate's degree only, who has 30 years of experience as a master mechanic, there isn't even a place on the pay scale to put them. So each district negotiates this differently. I know that the districts that are the most flexible have had the best results in terms of recruiting and retaining, but also the districts that offer good mentorship programs. I was an engineer with 2 master's degrees when I started teaching in career and technical education. I would not have made it past my first month if it wasn't for my mentor. So creating these structures around all new teachers, because all need to be supported equally, I think is important. So I don't have an answer exactly to your salary question because there isn't one, in my opinion.
Well, I don't think Chris had an answer down Salem either.
I wish I did. You're very familiar with the system. Yes.
Your turn, Appleby.
Thank you. This is just a general question. I'm not sure, it might be the whole group, but in many of these meetings, we've heard discussions around teachers leaving one district for another because the next district overpays better. And I'm curious to get a sense from all of you as principals, do you see more teachers, specifically teachers, leaving the profession entirely or changing to another district because it pays better? And I don't know if there's any sense here. I don't have any numbers, but I'm kind of curious because, again, my licensure numbers do not show a decrease in the number of licensed teachers. But I hear all the time from superintendents, I just lost a math teacher to a district down the road, and they're making $10,000 more a year. And I can pay them. So I'm curious if there's, and I know you have answers to this, but I'm curious if the principals have any insight, into, if you have any sense, is it, I guess I'm not seeing wholesale exodus from the profession so much as I'm seeing, for lack of a better terms, poaching. And in fact, this past fall, for the first time in the 5 years I've been at the department, we received at least 4 calls from superintendents about educators who've broken their contract to go work in another district because it paid better. And so I'm kind of curious if all of you have experienced that or if it's just retirements or people leaving.
It's a very good question. It's a big question. And I was actually thinking part of this response when you had asked your questions prior, Representative Milo. I think part of it is the hiring game has changed a bit too. I mean, that's an important thing to kind of acknowledge. For a long time, districts could more easily hire newer teachers, newer to the career teachers. They were less expensive to hire. It made sense. And for most of my career, I was a social studies teacher to begin. So when I was teaching and not an administrator, I was a social studies teacher. And I knew very well, from an early day, back in the 90s, once I got over, say, 6-7 years of teaching experience, I probably couldn't move districts as a social studies teacher. I would have priced myself out of that hiring market. So I think part of what we have seen also is that the hiring market has changed. Whereas if you want to be able to recruit and retain teachers, you've got to be willing to go up the scale, so to speak. So I know now we have more latitude with hiring, where you have more latitude to hire teachers with more years of experience. That, in part, I think, has produced part of the poaching type problem. I think on a second level, that will exacerbate things we see in terms of like inequities between communities in education. It just makes it harder. In short, those with resources are going to have an easier time recruiting and retaining, and those without resources are going to struggle more and more. I think Bill kind of spoke to that a few minutes ago when he was up here talking about what his district is experiencing. In terms of why teachers leave, we're lucky. We don't usually lose too many teachers. We're fortunate in that regard, but I am losing a teacher who's in her 4th or 5th year of experience this year, and she is electing to leave education itself. I don't think she'll show up in your recruitment numbers for at least 2 or 3 years until comes time to recertify. But for her, in her departure from education, I think it's been that mounting pressure and mounting stress that I spoke about, kind of the erosion of confidence in public education. I think she's, as a young person, probably 6 or 7 years out of college total, she's felt that. I think she went into it for the altruism and then has experienced these other pieces, and she's taken it personally. I don't know if that answers all of your questions.
Thank you. I would just like to mention, in case the committee is unaware, we have examples within a single SAU where one district within the SAU pays differently than another district in the same SAU, and we hear cases on a not irregular basis where an educator leaves in the same SAU, one district, to go down the street to the next district over, and they make $10,000 more, and it's the same SAU. And it seems to me that that's kind of counterproductive.
Senator Fenton has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, I want to say, well, happy first day of Teacher Appreciation Week. I think we forgot, we missed that one. We've heard, this is the Teacher Shortage Commission, so we're studying if there's a teacher shortage. We've heard some evidence that there may not be a teacher shortage, but according to y'all and you guys with boots on the ground, there is a teacher shortage, and you guys desperately need help. And the 3 words I heard the most were salary, debt, and most important, support. And it sounds like, and I'm not sure if I'm just stating this or a question, that you guys are looking for programs that will support and retain teachers, whether that be debt forgiveness or recruitment of new teachers. How do you support them within your schools? Things like that. Is that kind of the understanding what the crux of the issue is? Feel free to anyone jump on that one.
I think in addition to the items that you've laid out for us, one of the most significant things that we haven't gone into a lot of conversation about is culture. I meet with high school, middle school, elementary school, assistant principals, talk with colleagues across the nation, and teachers leave because of culture. That's a really big piece. Yes, it's salary, but time and time again, they're moving to find a school or a district that aligns with their purpose for becoming an educator, to work with a principal that has a vision, can execute the vision, and provide them with the supports to be successful in their building and in their district. So culture is a huge part of our seeing movement of educators. Not a mass exodus, as your numbers show, but a lot of movement, because I think there have been some severe cultural shifts in our profession, and those range district to district, region to region in the state. I hope that helps.
I didn't have culture, so I'll write it down now.
Another question?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on this a little bit. One of the goals that I had as a principal, as being the supervisor in the school, and I had schools, the elementary schools were about 400 to 600 kids in a building. You had to be in the classroom as often as you could be in the classroom. I'd like to know from the principals present here today, are you being tied down in your office with other issues? Maybe there are mental issues you're dealing in school with students that are coming in that have issues, or maybe you're dealing with regulations and rules and materials being asked by us or the Department of Education. Maybe there's 100 other issues that you could be faced with. How much time do you spend a day in the classroom? You are the leaders, and without a good principal in a building, it's not going to cut it.
The short answer is yes. Meaning, yeah, we're tied down and we're out and it's busy. That being said, I believe our goal as leaders is to make it into the classrooms as much as possible. For myself, I had to do 90 classroom observations this year and write them all up. And after that, I met with every teacher to make sure that we were on the same page. So yes, we're tied down, we're pushed, but again, as leaders and aspiring leaders, what we're trying to support our organization with is you have to be in the classroom. You have to be the educational leader. You have to be the face of the district. You have to create that climate, that culture, that organizational feel that everybody knows that you're there and you're part of the building. So are we tied down with more stuff than we have been? Absolutely. This is my 14th year as an administrator. I feel like I'm landlocked some days where I just haven't been able to lead, but I have to force myself out of my office to make sure that I'm seen by the kids and say hello to the teachers as well.
What do we have to do to get that reversed somewhat so that you have that opportunity to be the curriculum leader, be the instructional leader, be all those things that a principal is supposed to be? In the office, I know you do your thing in there. I've done that too. But it's really not going to make a big difference with the students in the school, and you're interacting with students and doing what we had to do for every evaluation with 3 observations, and depending upon whether they were at that time tenured or not tenured, and so you just can't be in there for those those formal observation periods. You got to be in there more often than that. What do we have to do to change that process so you can be? Is there anything we can unload off you, or counselors, or what's the answer here?
The answer is developing a strong distributive leadership model in your schools and in your district. And that means hiring and retaining exceptional teachers who have an interest in helping to lead your school. Because the building principals, to Dave's point, there are so many responsibilities that have changed. It's multifaceted in a way that it never was before. The role is extremely complex. And you can't just be rushing around putting out fires all day and make a long-term standing impact, whether it's culturally, academically, in bridging connections with community and parents and families. So really spending time as a school community and as a district, helping teachers, leaders, superintendents, understanding the value of implementing that distributed leadership model. Because there are teachers, they don't want to be an assistant principal or a principal, but they want to be a leader. They don't want to be confined to just the limits of classroom instruction, and they're talented, and there are things that they can do to support building leadership in their roles as leaders, whether it's a counselor, behavior specialist, dean, department head, or somebody that can just lead a professional learning committee meeting so the principal can go do some other things and might not be able to be at all of those meetings. So that is a huge piece that we continue to reinforce in our conversations with building leaders. Get your interested parties lined up. We've got to line our bench in the state from classroom to boardroom, really, right? If we want a strong educational system in our state, we can't continue to function in silos and look at educators in cohorts. We have to work together to make long-standing impact and change.
See, I would add to that it might help if we stop legislating mandates at the local level too.
Agreed.
I've been at Winnicott for 19 years, and we alluded to it earlier. Teaching has changed since the pandemic. I think there's always been mental health issues with students prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic clearly has highlighted those issues. As families came back to school, teachers were not equipped to deal with it. Teachers had their own social emotional issues, mental health issues. I was looking at some of my files and folders from several years ago where I was able to sit down and strategically plan and create programs. Since COVID, I've been walking around the building dealing with the mental, emotional support of students and teachers. I'm looking at creative ways. The students that came back, the current 9th graders and 10th graders, from a discipline standpoint, we had to deal with that. I can't keep on suspending students, so how can I keep these students in the building to provide the emotional and social support that they need? The families have been very supportive. At the same time, they don't know what to do with their sons or daughters as they come to school. So part of it is working to support teachers to deal with the day-to-day issues that's not academic. How do we help teachers, administrators connect with the students, bridge that gap so the students want to come to school? Winnicott has a great culture. How can I continue improving that? How can we make all schools someplace where the students want to come to school that would provide the resources? It could be more guidance counselors. It could be more mental services. But those are the things that clearly has changed from the standpoint it's not clearly about going to the classroom, teaching academics, observing the instruction, but the emotional support that we need to provide for everybody.
That's a follow-up on that. You mentioned the issue of the social emotional on the part of the teaching staff. Are you finding that they are engaging with each other at the same level as they did prior to COVID?
No, we're getting back to that, but that's one of the things working with my teachers that as the COVID, as far as the requirements diminished, how can we start doing more things with teachers, getting the staff together to do things that we've done in the past?
Well, I do have a load of questions. Okay, just one. In your recruiting of teachers, are you recruiting teachers from out of state? Are you getting more people applying from out of state? I know that as a trustee with the university system in New Hampshire, we've invited in Department of Educations in PSU, Keene, UNH. We're hearing those departments are smaller. much smaller than they were in previous years. They're not putting out the number of new teachers we need in the state. So are you having to recruit outside, beyond?
So again, the short answer is yes. Just 2 weeks ago, the superintendent, myself, the middle school principal, and our curriculum coordinator attended the Plymouth State University Teacher Recruitment Day. And there were 26 schools there, high schools from across the state of New Hampshire. For the 2 hours we were there, we had 5 teachers show up to our booth. That was it. So very few teachers. This is at Plymouth State in their beautiful facility. We had 5. Luckily, 2 that showed up. We hired today, so that was good for us. So, but again, as far as recruiting, we have someone from Texas called us today. I have someone from Ohio that called us last week. So we're looking all over the place to fill spots.
I would just add to that, and I would say that I was really excited to hear the plan going on in Littleton, and I would share with you that many districts in New Hampshire are doing things like that connection that Littleton has, maybe not to the extent with the housing there too, on their own, because we're problem solvers by nature, and we are trying to build partnerships that are looking to bring the teachers in. So an example, at Amherst, we've connected with St. A's to begin offering fellowships. Manchester has jumped on board too, trying to get special educators who graduated a program in the district to pay for some of the coursework for these individuals to do their internship across the year. Manchester has done this with SNU as well. Keene State has partnered with school districts out in the Conval area to try to get teachers in. But what's challenging as a principal is that it's kind of on you on your own to do that, right? To find the partnership with the IHE. There isn't a big concerted effort for the development of these programs, whereas a new principal potentially entering the field in New Hampshire, you would know where to go to connect this resource. It is sort of about who you know and the connections you have with those individual IHEs. I think that's an area that we could really look to improve to help establish that pipeline for teachers and eventually really establish a pipeline even for future leaders. Other states have done that where there's been some dedicated funding and support in an effort to really benefit all districts and all students in the state.
So can I just follow up on that one? No, sure. So when I was up in Alaska, we through UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks, they coordinated all teacher vacancies in that state through there. So if I was looking for teachers, I'd contact UAF and get on the site right here, and I could find out where these teachers were. And they could also, they posted all the jobs which were open and vacant in the state. I know that in talking with Don Burks at Plymouth State, he's the president, and with Nate Bowditch, Academic Affairs, they can't even find people to work within the college, seeing that there's no workforce housing in Plymouth. So we have some real issues there, but I think a coordinated method of advertising these jobs so we all knew if I'm looking for somebody to work down in Rochester, I could go to a central site. Is there such a central site that we have that's coordinated by either Keene or Plymouth State or UNH?
There is a website that most school districts use, edjobsnh.com, that's coordinated through, I believe, the Superintendents Association. And districts are able to individually post jobs. It doesn't historically track the positions though, so it doesn't give us a whole lot of data on openings over time. It really is just a repository for job openings that individual school districts submit to, and then colleges encourage new grads to use as a resource. We all individually connect to those stakeholders at the IHE. So the person in career services at UNH, the person who's leading the teacher prep program at St. A's, the education professors at Keene. You have to sort of navigate that on your own to maybe reach out to upcoming graduates who might not have noticed openings on EdJobs too.
So just to follow up to that, so it sounds like you begin to look at innovative ways to recruit and even retain. My sense is that there is no central coordination, or there's no repository of somebody who's saying, okay, here's some ideas, let's try it here, or let's try it there. It's really kind of at random at this point in time that the department, I'm not criticizing the department, but it doesn't sound like the department's played any role at all in looking at this retention for any new ideas, etc. Is that a correct perception?
It's my opinion that individual school districts and school principals have kind of figured out ways to begin processes on their own to do that. Like I said, I was really excited to hear about Littleton, want to learn more about that program and how, maybe other districts could replicate in different ways.
I may be old-fashioned, but when I was principal up in Winthrop, Maine, and other places in Maine, we always advertised in the Maine Sun-Telegram or the Maine paper. Is there such a paper in this state that if I wanted to look for a job as an elementary teacher, I could get it, the Sunday paper or some such, and it's not there? So we need to really get something centralized.
You're assuming a 20-something needs a newspaper.
Okay.
Right.
I tell my age, huh?
Okay, any more questions from this particular group? It's been very exciting, very energizing. Yes, Representative Ford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question to you as a group is, what other part of the community have you involved in trying to resolve this issue? I was recently at a conference and we were having a discussion like this, same subject, and they were telling me all they did, but they didn't go to the legislature at all. And I asked them, why not? And it just never occurred to them. So here we are on the flip side of that coin, and I'm asking you, why aren't you telling me about the local bank, the local largest business, the local person who could employ the spouse of the person you want to recruit, who want to create a community that is larger, broader? In this case, digital access was one of the mechanisms they were discussing at the conference I was at. But they had talked to builders to include wiring for digital access in the properties they were then renting to faculty, students, whatever, in the area. And they all piled in together. And so I would say maybe it's time we ought to start thinking about making a community-wide endeavor to make people happy with being where they are, having access to more than they have locally. That's what the internet is for. Maybe we ought to use some of that. And getting back to the advertising, it's another way to advertise the community and the market and the job and so forth. But that's what they were doing. I throw it out as an idea for us.
We need a centralized area somewhere for these jobs to be advertised. That's just part of the equation. It's a very small part of the equation. I think we've got a huge problem here. One, we don't have enough people getting into the profession. Two, we're not paying them properly. And three, we're dealing with that culture. And we got to reverse this. And we got to work hard trying to get this thing resolved.
Well, I would say thank you very much for this group presentation. Now we have to move on to, we have a couple of other people to present. So, and I think we're going to have to try very hard to keep to the 15 minutes, otherwise we'll be here to supper time. Executive Director Jane Bergeron.
Good afternoon, and I won't repeat a lot of the things that have already been said. So my name is Jane Bergeron-Beaulieu, and I'm the Executive Director for the New Hampshire Association of Special Ed Administrators, and I'm here representing our association members. So I just want to start off by saying just a piece of research for us to be aware of is that 45% of our educators entering the field leave in their first 5 years, which is pretty alarming, and it's even more so for our special education teachers. And when we think about special education, I just want to put it into context in that we are responsible for preschool to age 22. So even beyond our traditional school settings, our special ed administrators are responsible for recruiting and retaining across the spectrum. Part of their job also is to ensure that our private special education schools have the appropriately credentialed staff, and they are really struggling to fill their positions, they're also responsible for recruiting and getting services to our charter schools. So not only do they have the responsibility of their own school systems, they have all of those other layers that they have to be looking at that. And part of that is paraprofessionals, part of it is your special education teachers, and it's your related service providers. And currently in New Hampshire, there are hundreds of openings, especially with our paras and our related service providers. And knowing that we are dealing with our most vulnerable and needy kids, this is really become a crisis, not only in New Hampshire, but nationally. And so when we think about some of the factors, I think you've just heard a lot of them. I would echo the conversations we just had about the children and youth we're serving are becoming much more complex. We are seeing kids with needs that we haven't seen in years that are very, very complex. And that has a ripple effect. If you don't have the staff to provide services to these kids, it just exacerbates the challenge, in addition to the legal issues that we face if those positions aren't filled. We also talked about the pipeline. So in our colleges and universities in New Hampshire, we're not getting those special ed teachers. They were graduating hundreds. And now, we're just not seeing teachers wanting to go into the profession of special education because it is become so complex. It's become very legal oriented. And it's really, that's a real factor for us. You've heard about the compensation issues. There's such inequity in terms of resources and support for our special education teachers, depending upon the district and schools that you work in. You've heard about culture and the public perception. In New Hampshire, we really have struggled over the past 3 to 5 years with special education being described as a broken system, and it's not. Nationally, we can give you the figures about the success rate of our children and youth with disabilities, and they're very high in New Hampshire. And we have very few formal complaints against our school districts. So it isn't a broken system, but yet the culture in which our public schools are functioning, that seems to be the perception. So, when we think about solutions, we've heard some great things. We also, would hope that, in terms of what we've been doing, many of our special education teachers have given up their planning periods and being paid extra. They work after school. They're taking on summer programming, which is exhausting for them, quite honestly, when we talk about wellness. We're trying the best we can to recruit and retain. We're also faced with people leaving the field of special education administration. And this year alone, we have over 18 folks who are leaving. Many of them are not at retirement age, but they're just saying, I need to go and do something else. Some of them are even going back to teaching because it has become such an adversarial role and just so complex. One of the things that we've done as an association to troubleshoot in terms of supporting our members, we have worked very closely with Keene State College and the Bureau of Credentialing to create a pathway leading towards certification as a special education administrator. Currently in New Hampshire, none of our colleges or universities offer a special education administrator degree program. The one in Plymouth has closed. UNH is no longer accepting students in that program because no one was applying to go. And sometimes our programs in states other than New Hampshire, there isn't that reciprocity and their certification sometimes isn't accepted. So we've worked with the Bureau of Credentialing, Keene State College, to develop modules that are going to lead towards certification as a special ed administrator. It's been a good 2 years in the making, and we're hoping to launch that this summer. But it's been great to work with the Bureau and great to work with our colleges and universities. And so that's kind of a snapshot of where we're at with teacher shortages when it comes to special education. and open it up for questions.
Is there any questions from the committee members? Senator Representative Myler.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Why are there more SPED kids now than there were?
Well, I think you've heard a lot about the mental health crisis. We've got, rising numbers of children and youth with autism. You've got, the substance abuse issues that are happening in our state. We're also closely looking at the research around COVID and COVID babies. And we're seeing a huge influx of very young children with very highly unusual needs and delays. So this is just the beginning of a larger bubble that's coming up the pipeline. You're welcome.
Questions? Do you have them? Any other questions? Representative Ladd.
Yeah, Representative Myler is, the number of kids that we have that are special ed right now, it's 30,000 kids right now approximately. Of which, if you look back at 14 years ago, we had 30,000 kids, but we had a total population, 210,000 kids, now we're 165,000 kids, so do the math. Other health impairment is a real issue that we have, one of the 13 categories right in our IEP. My concern is, are you seeing a higher instance of special ed teachers having medical issues or having to take time from work due to the fact that they're dealing with violence, they're dealing with, especially those in life skills, that are dealing with issues? I know the classroom teachers also, but there are some very difficult issues that these teachers have. Is there a higher instance of them having to say, hey, I can't come to school today, I'm wiped out, or I'm ill, or what have you? I'm curious to know what the relationship is between the regular classroom teacher and the special ed teacher. That's primarily, I'm looking at those that are dealing with those categories of IEP, which are like the other health impairments or the areas which have a lot of behavior, emotional, mental illness associated with it.
So those are good questions. I haven't heard from our members in regards to teacher absence. We are hearing and seeing, more aggressive students. We are really needing to do lots more training for staff and paras on how to diffuse aggressive behaviors. But we don't see the absences in terms of teachers. What we are seeing is teachers just being exhausted. Like I said, they're working after school, they're working their planning periods, they're working the summer school programs. There hasn't been a break, and keep in mind that during COVID, our special ed teachers were in the buildings working with kids when the vast majority of kids were doing distance learning. But there was an executive order that special education be provided in person. So they never, they have been in some very intensive situations for the past several years.
Thank you, Jane.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Donna Magoo.
Boy, thank you. I have been waiting back there to speak, boy. Before I get started on my 15 minutes, can I answer some of the questions that were brought before that I didn't have the ability to answer?
Sure, why not?
Perfect, thank you so much. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about is...
Which school districts?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm from the Newport School District. So some of the things that I wanted to talk about is some of the changes that are making things difficult as...
Could you turn on your microphone there? Thank you.
Okay. So the first thing, one of the things that's making it a little bit difficult for us is there's actually now a new policy or law that any type of new teacher that gets hired has to go through two criminal background checks. The school district has to do one, and the Department of Education now has to do one. All right, which to us it's time consuming and it's very costly for the person that is going through this, for the staff member, right? Which it's the same thing. We're looking for the same exact thing, and there needs to be some form of if we're doing a background check, why does the DOE have to do one now? Or if the DOE is doing one, why does the school districts have to do one now? And so that's part of it. And so it can take up to 4 weeks to get a background check back. And we're legally not allowed to have anyone in the buildings until the background check is back. And so if I hire a staff member in the middle of the year,
I still have to wait until the background check comes back before I can put them in the building, right? And by then, there are people looking for a job, and so it then becomes, well, if I get a job somewhere else, I'm just gonna go somewhere else. Not necessarily in a school district, but it may be, you know, Walmart or McDonald's or something other than the school district, right?
Before we jump to another, can Steve respond to that while we're on it?
Sure.
Thank you, that's a great point, Superintendent. I'd just like to mention, several years ago, the statute was changed requiring the department to conduct background checks on all new applicants as well as educator preparation students. And that law changed. The rationale at the time for it was we were issuing licenses. Unlike any state that we talked to, we did a survey nationally. 29 jurisdictions responded, 28 states, 1 territory. All 28 states at the licensure level conducted a check prior to issuing the license. The one, I don't know what we call them, territory that didn't conduct it was Guam, because they said they know everybody on the island. But the rationale for us conducting a check at the state level for licensure is we were giving out licenses, which, you know, is a property rights issue. It's a ticket to work.
Yes.
We were giving out licenses to people who may be unemployable in a district. So if I licensed Representative Ford to be a math teacher, and he comes to your district, and you conduct a check, and it turns out he murdered someone 20 years ago, you can't hire him. But I gave him a license. So that was the rationale. Not saying it's a perfect system.
It makes sense, but I
that
think
was
one
the
of us should
rationale
have
at
to
the
do it,
time.
not both of us. Because if you're giving the license and you're doing the criminal check, the school district shouldn't have to. And like now our bus drivers are required to go through that same process. But now bus drivers, their license is on file. So if I have somebody that is a bus driver for me in Newport and they decide they want to go to Claremont, they can go to Claremont and not have to do a criminal background check again. However, in education, if I come and get a job and I work for Newport for 2 weeks and then I go work in Claremont, I have to get another background check done. So it's not a background check that follows me, which I understand the reasoning. You know, maybe we should do every 5 years or something like that, that everyone has to go through it again. But I think that we're losing people because there's just too much in the way of getting positions. But that was one thing. The other things, I really think that we really need to look at any type of laws that we put in place. An example would be parents' rights, right? That's scaring teachers to death, right? Because it's requiring teachers to do things, you know, we're supposed to be the line of offense for students, right? And they're supposed to want to come to us in situations that terrify them. And now they're taking away that, right? And so looking at that, I think that really needs to be looked into. I understand it's big, but it really needs, someone really needs to read that and see what the implications are for classroom teachers and all leaders in the building, all staff members in the building, including our custodial staff, that if they happen to hear a child mention something, they have to call a parent, right? And so we really need to be thinking about those things, as well as requiring things, putting things in place, but not giving funding. Just a quick example. I know this was a while ago, but it's one that just kind of sticks in my head. All school districts were required to put tampons in the bathrooms because kids could not afford them. So all districts had to do that. But the districts were not given funded. They were not given funded to do that. And so that's another thing that really needs to be looked at. If we're going to be requiring school districts to do something that's going to cause them to pay more money, places like Newport, we can't afford to be doing these types of things, right? And so the more funding the more stuff that you're putting on us, you're taking away from the education of our students. And looking at the laws as far as our SRO. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the SRO cannot do any type of arrest or any type of interference when a child is in school unless it's a severely criminal act. They bring a gun to school, they murder someone, things such as that. But if I have a child that is selling drugs, that it's up to the school district to do the punishment or the discipline of that student, and it's not up to the courts, which I think to us, we're kind of, we have a lot of parents wanting this process because if their child does go to court, it opens up more availability for them to get services. And so we're seeing a lot of this stuff not being done because legislative was put in place because they felt that the schools were targeting kids and putting them on a pipeline to prison is what they refer to it as, pipeline to prison. Instead of looking at it as we are professionals and we do our professional judgment and we would never in any means do anything to harm any student or do anything to a student that we feel would cause them mental anguish or mental health issues, right? And so they're kind of taking that part away. So I think that is a big part of it. The next thing that I just wanted to talk about is teachers leaving our district. I have had conversations with Steve about teachers in the 2 or 3 teachers in the middle of the school year decided to go to another district because they got paid more money. That left me 3 teachers short in the middle of the year. How am I going to find replacement? And so years ago when I first started teaching, there was a penalty. If I left a district, I could forfeit my license. Right? I was required, once I signed a contract, to stay at that job until the end of that contract. That is no longer in place. You can just leave, and I can put in there, like I think I have 3%, but you know how often that gets paid? 0. No one ever pays that. So I think we really need to look at reinstating that and saying, if you're committing to work, you sign a contract and you're committed to be in that place, then you should be required to stay there for the duration of that contract. Of course, if there's certain issues, you know, if there's mental health issues or they need to move out of state for whatever reasons, I think that should be at the discretion of the superintendent and the employee. But I think to go to another school district should not be able to be done. But you also want to look at the teachers are leaving. They are leaving to go to other paying districts. But I know myself, if you were to look up my certification, I have 5 certifications. So it looks like there's more in the system than there actually is. I have my special ed, so it looks like if someone was to look and say, how many special ed teachers do we have in the state of New Hampshire? My name would come up as a special ed teacher. I am not a special ed teacher, I'm a superintendent. So I keep my certifications every year. So whenever I renew, I pay the fee and I do the hours to renew those certifications. So we're looking at 4 certifications that are not justified as being in positions, one of them being an elementary teacher, right? And then I think that I always refer to my middle school principal as heat miser, because he is spending so much of his time running around the building with his hair standing up, putting out fires everywhere, that he doesn't have time to be in the classrooms. And that's an issue that we have to look at. But it's because of the students and the students' behaviors, right? And so spending more time in the classroom is becoming difficult because of behaviors that we're seeing. And so, like I said to you, I always refer to him as heat miser because that's a lot of what he's doing. So he doesn't get to build those relationships with his staff, which in turn doesn't help the culture of our building. And then, let's see, documents to start new programs. We've been trying to start a new program almost all year. And every time it's, no, this isn't right, this isn't right. It would be nice if they could just say, okay, we trust you, you're a school district, you have been running for so many years, start the program and let us work through the process with you. But we have students that are outliers right now because of our program cannot be up and running and hasn't been able to be up and running for the year, for all year. And so it would be nice if we could work more as a team than, and get the paperwork out of the way. This is what the idea is. It works, let's move forward and work together as a team. I think that would be very helpful. Advertisement, we actually go above and beyond. We do Facebook, Indeed, EdJob, local radio stations. We send flyers home with our students to bring home in case their parents need a job. We hang flyers around the building. And we actually also advertise in the Lebanon and the Claremont movie theater. So before every movie, an advertisement for our school district comes up saying that we need teachers and we need support staff. So we really try to get people into our district. But I just wanted to answer those questions. They was killing me back there. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about those or wants me to start with my spiel now.
Go ahead with your spiel.
All right, I apologize. All right, so let me start. So again, I'm Donna Magoon. I am the interim superintendent, soon to be superintendent as of Friday morning of the Newport School District. First, I want to talk to you a little bit about my students. All right, my students this year alone have had their parents arrested due to drug sales. They have been put in rehab because of drug addiction. They have major mental health issues where I have elementary school students that are trying to commit suicide by hanging. I have elementary students that are using razor blades to cut themselves. And that is just my elementary students. I could go on about my middle school and my high school students. I also have a large majority of my students are what we call, they're homeless, but we call them couch surfers because they are at a certain age where they just live with one friend for a night and another friend for a night or another friend for a night, but they would be considered homeless. I have a very large homeless population. And I also have a very large population of students that are living with others, not their mothers, not their fathers. They're living with, I have one student who actually lives with his 20-year-old brother because of incidents that have happened, not just incarceration, but parents decide this is what I signed up for, and they just leave. All right, so we have a very, very diverse and needy population. And so when I talk about my teachers, it's very important that you know about my students first. My teachers are teachers. They are mothers, they're fathers, they're social workers, they are a large majority of things. They work day, night, weekend. And I'm sorry, I get very emotional about my staff because they're very important to me. They work days, nights, weekends, summers. They never stop. Every day I am reading papers that my staff members have to fill out about abuse cases that are happening in our schools with our young girls and boys. It's all for a whopping salary of $37,000 to start. So I want you to think about that. Would you want to take on that huge responsibility for $37,000? That is with a bachelor's degree, first year teacher. And that is what I mostly get in my district. The reason why is because of all of this. However, I want to say that this past school year, this is a very scary time of year for all superintendents because contracts went out for teachers. Last year when I took the position on July 1, I needed a math teacher, I needed a science teacher, I needed a PE teacher, I needed a school counselor, I needed a computer science teacher, I needed 2 special ed teachers, and I needed a language arts teacher, all in my middle school. That's just my middle school. How can I start a school year with 7 major components that I'm required by law to have? So what did we do? My team got together and we decided that my 6th grade math teachers were going to be teaching 8th grade math. My 6th and 7th grade math teachers were going to be teaching 8th grade math. My 6th and 7th grade science teachers were going to be teaching 8th grade science. My other teachers were going to be teaching PE, and they were going to be helping with computer science, and they were going to be helping with special ed services because I'm required to do that. All during their planning period and their breaks. What does that mean? That means I have a bunch of teachers that really kick butt. However, you can only kick butt for so long, and then it becomes burnout, right? And so this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing my teachers that are very committed, they're very loyal, very dedicated, but they are burnt. And I walk through the halls, and I just shake my head in shame that we as a state are not doing anything to really support our teachers, right? I can only do so much. My district doesn't pay a lot, and my teachers know that, and they know that coming in. What we do is we train a lot of really good teachers to go work in other districts. So they come to us, we give them all this massive training, they get to work with our population, and then they get hired in Claremont for about $8,000 more, Sunapee for about $10,000 more, and it goes on and on. And so we really need to be looking at a lot of that stuff because my district is one that really, and I'm not saying, I should say all districts, but I'm focusing on my district right now. But with my population, if you think about the needs of my students, they need that person in their life that is stable and that they know will be there year after year for them. And we don't have that a lot because my turnover is so high that I have teachers leaving first year, second year. And so my kids don't have that consistency of that adult in their life that they know that will be there year after year for them. Trying to see. My mentoring program is not as strong as it can be, and the reason why is because I have so many new teachers. I can't really have a strong mentoring program. So I have teachers that have been in my district for years that are mentoring 3, 4 teachers. right? And we know that's not realistic. They should have one, maybe two. And so that becomes an issue. And I know that we could outsource, but it's not the same of having that person right there in that building with you that can have those immediate conversations with you. And so I really feel that as a state, we really need to do something for our teachers, and it needs to be across the board, right? We can't just be looking at one district and saying, you know, well, this district needs this or this district. We need to find a way to balance it all out and look at what are we paying our teachers and what can we do to keep them and what can we do to recruit them. Because we get them, but I'll tell you what ends up happening. They apply everywhere else, and then they take the job in Newport when they don't get a job anywhere else. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing because we've got some really great teachers from that. But again, we bring them in, we train them, and they leave us. And that was my spiel. I'm hoping. And I do also want to talk about that, the leadership changes. That's very hard because whenever you have leadership change, of course, it causes inconsistency. So now we have students that don't have the staff members that they need to start to move forward and build those relationships. And then we don't have the teachers that don't have the support that they need by their administration in the building. So that's been an issue for us as well. Thank you.
Question from the committee, Representative Myler.
Thank you for being here and sharing your story with us. What suggestions, if you have any, to deal with the variance of compensation from one district to another? Do you have any ideas of how that might be solved?
Well, I think we need to look at adequate funding across the state, right? And what do we do? And I think, right, I always say, why recreate a wheel, right? As a superintendent, if I had a question or if I need something, I reach out to my other superintendents and I say, what are you doing in your district? And how is it? Is it successful? What programs are you using, right? I don't understand why as a state, we are not reaching out to other states and saying, what are some of the things that you're doing to keep your teachers? Or what are some of the things that you're doing to make the pay adequate throughout?
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, thank you. And I also want to say, May 1st was actually Principal Appreciation Day, so thank you so much for all your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Koski.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Koski. I'm Assistant Superintendent of Claremont. I'm new to that position this year. Prior to that, I was the Science and Engineering Director in Windham, New Hampshire. This isn't just an issue for poorer districts. I know Windham this year could not hire a high school science teacher all year, and they had to cover that position with having teachers pick up other duties. While I was in Windham, I saw a diminishing amount of applicants for our open science positions. When I first began there 8 years ago, I had 7 or 8 candidates. Often I was poaching from other school districts, but that's kind of the nature of the game. And by the time I left, we were down to 1 or 2 applicants for a position, and to the point where they weren't able to fill a position this year. But in Claremont, we are in a lower population area. We have a lower salary scale, and so it's a very different fight. We average 25 to 30% teacher turnover every year in our district. This creates a lot of stress, and as Superintendent McBoone just spoke of, we end up training many new teachers for other districts. We're a pretty short ride to Lebanon and a little longer ride to Hanover, where many of our teachers go after getting 3 or 4 years of instructional practice. We need to do that training for them and provide the professional development. We hire many new teachers, or we train other folks to transition into teaching. So this year, one of our biology teachers was a special education secretary. And so we transitioned her. She had a degree close enough to a biology degree, and we were able to transition her to a biology teaching position. We took a paraprofessional and have transitioned her to a media specialist at the middle school library. And so we're having to kind of grow our own teachers to fill these spots. We also ended up this year without a 6th grade math or 6th grade science teacher. And so we had other teachers cover those positions with extra periods, or we reduced the amount of instruction students had. And so we end up alternating, or students getting less instruction in an area. None of which helps with our state test scores or educational progress that the students make. But we have a finite resource that we need to spread out and meet the needs with as best we can. We're also short special educators, which has been spoken of earlier. And again, we just take what we have and do the best we can with what's there. I'm not sure that there's some questions about solutions. I know for a few years I taught in Florida in some urban districts, and because of their county-wide setup, they would pay teachers more money to work in the poor performing schools. And it was a challenge for the better teachers to go to those districts, receive an additional stipend when their students showed progress. So it hinged on student progress. Merit pay for teachers is a sticky issue, very difficult to measure, but over time, several of those southern counties have shown growth in their poor performing districts by putting the better teachers in those classrooms, incentivizing them to do so, but they did it voluntarily. I think there are solutions also mentioned that are not monetary. Certainly having consistent leadership and creating a school culture. We have incredibly dedicated teachers who have been through so much turmoil and turnover in Claremont. It's amazing that they stay, but they're dedicated to the town. They often live in the town and are committed to the community. And so those folks are gems, and we just don't have enough of them to make the progress we need to make. We are in a situation where we have some excellent building leadership now, and those folks are showing growth. We've somehow ended up with 2 former superintendents who are building principals, and that's proving to be very effective in those buildings. And so they are, we feel like we're on the cusp of a lot of improvement. But I jotted some of the ideas down from Littleton. We are kind of physically situated, not very close to any of the colleges. Dartmouth is our closest school, but it doesn't have an education program. So Keene State and Plymouth State are a little bit distant for us. And there's a lot of the districts teachers would have to pass to come to Claremont. So I don't, unfortunately, don't come bringing too many solutions, just describing our situation, but I would be happy to answer any questions. I guess I would suggest this, and I'm not sure how it would work. There are shortages in some particular certification areas, special education, math, science, and because of those shortages, I guess I would suggest that we not make, I should check my back while I'm speaking, not make payment equal for all teacher positions. I know everybody works equally hard, but the way the marketplace works, when there's a shortage, for example, technology, the pay increases. And it's just like housing, it's just like any other marketplace. When there are shortages, there's greater demand and an increased salary. So that might be something to consider as a possible solution.
I have a question.
Representative Myler?
Thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you.
We've heard the term poaching
Yes.
several times today. if there were a requirement that once you are contracted for a year, that you could not break that contract without some sense of your own certification being at risk, would that help to solve the problem or not?
It would probably solve the mid-year problem of teachers leaving before the end of the school year. I think that turnover would probably occur then in a shorter time frame during the summers or, but yeah, I think it would help because a mid-year departure is a crisis. There's just no way to solve that.
As a follow-up to that, in Claremont, for example, when you hit that mid-year point this past year, how many teachers left, for example, to go someplace else?
Yeah, we lost one teacher only due to, but it was a family situation and they had to go back to North Carolina. But we went through the school year without losing any positions by losing teachers to other districts.
Representative Ladd.
Thank you very much, Senator. I'm looking at the spreadsheet which we have here when we looked at adequacy from the House perspective. And we added a category in there called fiscal capacity disparity aid, which benefits Claremont. It would jump your annual revenue by $2 million. How and where would you spend this $2 million?
Gosh. Wow. We would probably, this year, we renegotiated our teacher's contract. And we funneled as much money as possible into our teachers' salaries. And so we put $1 million into our teacher contract by reallocating other, what we consider to be less or lower priority items, because teacher retention is our biggest issue. And so I would guess that we would put that into that problem. If we can fully staff our positions and we can maintain those positions, we feel like our students are going to make the most progress.
May I follow up? During your conversation, you made reference to the possibility of dealing with these vacancies in science, math, technology, special education, as some other states, and I don't know if they're doing this or not, where they could pay a stipend on top of that negotiated agreement for the individual to come in and teach them. I had a hard time keeping science folks up in Alaska. I lose them to BP, British Petroleum. I lose them to Exxon. I lose them to those organizations which had the cash and could, steal them for another 50 grand. But if I had the ability to pay a stipend to get up there, I might keep some of these wonderful people in the schools. Do you know of any states